Good afternoon. My name is Helen Turner, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of Education for the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, please take a moment to silence your phones. Thank you. Today, we are observing Yom HaShoah. The full name of the day commemorating the victims of the Holocaust is Yom HaShoah v'Hagevurah, literally the day of remembrance of the Holocaust and the heroism. It is marked on the 27th day in the month of Nisan, which this year falls on the 17th and 18th of April. Throughout the world, communities will gather this week in remembrance to mourn the loss of loved ones, but also to remember the stories of resistance. This year has special significance. It is the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel. This program has had over a 25-year history as a cornerstone of the Jewish community in St. Louis. Today, you will hear from survivors, descendants, poets, and clergy as we remember the survivors and honor the victims. To begin our commemoration, we will have a powerful Torah procession. The St. Louis community is home to several Torahs rescued from the Holocaust. Today, we are grateful to have them with us. They are symbols of resistance and faith and are carried by our local rabbis and descendant congregants. Laura Wildman, granddaughter of Holocaust survivor Mendel Rosenberg, will receive the Torahs, and Rabbi David Reinhardt will place them upon the bema. Please join me now. I would also like to welcome Robert Feldman, who will join us to blow the shofar. Please turn your attention to the aisle for the Holocaust Torah procession, and if you are able, please rise. Thank you. Carrying the Torah for United Hebrew was Rabbi Rosenberg. The carrying of the Torah of Temple Emmanuel is Rabbi Hirsch. The carrying of the Torah for Temple Israel is descendant Matt Berman and family. Carrying the Torah for B'nai Amunah is Rabbi Abraham. Carrying the Torah for Kol Rina is Rabbi Shafran. Carrying the Torah for Central Reform Congregation is Rabbi Talvi. And carrying the Torah for Sheremoth is Rabbi Andrea Goldstein and Renee Silverstein and family. Now, please welcome Rabbi Rosenberg for some opening remarks.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to welcome you to this sacred space, and on behalf of our congregational board, our clergy, and our members, we welcome you to our home. We gather today to remember and honor the victims and survivors of the Shoah. Yom HaShoah is observed at this time of year, on the one hand, in honor of the resistors of the Warsaw Ghetto. Today, especially, we remember and honor the defiance of the resistors, whose heroism reminds us that even in the darkest of hours, courage and hope can be mighty weapons. From armed resistance, the use of weapons, partisan activity, and planned attacks on the Nazis, to the many examples of cultural and spiritual resistance, like the creation of schools and shuls in the ghettos, and the many drawings, paintings, poems, and diaries that remain to tell the stories, to bear witness not just to the atrocities, but to the resilience, courage, and hope of the Jewish people. We learn from the diary of Chaim Kaplan, who was in the Warsaw Ghetto. In his March 10th, 1940 entry, he writes, "It is our good fortune that the conquerors failed to understand the nature and strength of Polish Jewry. There is within us some hidden power, mysterious and secret, which keeps us going, keeps us alive despite the natural law. The strength of this power lies in the very nature of the Polish Jew, which is rooted in our eternal tradition that commands us to live." And Rabbi Yitzchak Nissenbaum, one of the rabbis of the Warsaw Ghetto, said, "We must fight al kiddush hachayim, for the sanctity of life." And so together we gather today al kiddush hachayim, for the sanctity of life, to share their stories lador vador, from generation to generation, so that we will never forget, their courage, their strength, and their hope, all firmly rooted in Chayim, life. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, we pray for the souls of the millions and millions of victims of this brutality. We pray that we honor their lives and their memories by observing this day, and by doing everything in our power and beyond to make sure that no such shadow again darkens our world. And we pray for shalom, for wholeness and for peace, to be in our midst now and forever. Please, O Holy One, answer our prayers and bring us a world devoid of hatred and one filled instead with peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And together we say, Amen.
Welcome, everyone, to our community's Yom HaShoah commemoration. My name is Carol Steinberg, and I'm honored to serve as the inaugural board chair for the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum. For the past 2 years, we have hosted this program virtually. As I look out across the room, I am reminded of how powerful it feels to once again hold Yom HaShoah in person. Thank you to United Hebrew for making this possible. Thank you to Leslie and Harvey Wolf for generously sponsoring this program and for your continued dedication to tell your family's story. Thank you to our survivors and descendants for sharing yourselves and your memories with us and trusting us with your legacy. Thank you to the Yom HaShoah Committee, our local community, the synagogues here today, and all who made this event possible. And a special thank you to the museum staff who worked tirelessly on this program, all while running a successful Holocaust museum, which has welcomed over 15,000 visitors since opening on November 2nd. Your work and the attendance of each person here shows your dedication to a cause represented by the museum's tagline, in honor of the survivors and the memory of the victims. Today, we honor that promise by paying tribute to our community's survivors, many of whom are with us today and their descendants. We also remember the 6 million Jewish victims and the millions of others who were murdered during the Holocaust. Please join me for a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. I will now turn things over to Museum's Interim Executive Director, Dr. Frances Levine.
Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Carol, for serving as our board chair. And like you, I have so much joy to see all of you joined with us today in this day of memorialization. This year's theme for Yom HaShoah is Voices of Resistance. In 2023, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and remember the brave souls who fought valiantly and until the end against Nazi oppression. The daffodils, which you see here on the bima today, symbolizes this resistance. Those heroes were so many brave Jewish individuals whose resistance to the Nazis and their collaborators still inspire us today. I want to take a moment to recite some of the lyrics of the song Zong Nit Kein Mal, the Song of the Partisans. I grew up hearing this song all my life, but I never understood the words until I began to work at the Holocaust Museum. We'll be hearing this song later in the program. It was written in 1943 by Hirsch Glick, a Jewish inmate of the Vilna Ghetto. It was later adopted by many Jewish partisan groups in Eastern Europe as a symbol of resistance against Nazi persecution. The words say, "This song is written with blood and not with pencil lead. It's not a tune sung by birds in the wild. This song was sung by people amidst collapsing walls. It is sung with pistols in their hands. So never say that you are going your last way, although skies fill with lead-covered blue days. Our promised hour will come soon. Our marching steps will ring out, we are here." The heroes who proclaim these lyrics and so many ghetto fighters and partisans rose up in armed resistance against oppression. Yet during the Holocaust, the Jewish people resisted in every way. Some maintained their religious traditions. Others fought to rescue and protect their fellow Jews. Some, like Emanuel Ringelblum, worked hard to record the horrors they witnessed for future generations. And so many resisted simply by retaining and reclaiming their own names, often so cruelly ripped away from them and replaced by a number. As we remember the heroes today, we cannot forget the immense and indescribable horrors of the Holocaust and the lives of those who experienced firsthand. This is a very challenging history, a hard history, but a crucial history. I recently shared a museum visit with my good friend, Dr. Tim Carson. And after his visit, I asked Tim to write a poem about his experience. The poem is now printed on the back of your programs. Tim and his wife, Kathy, join us today to center this history in the reading of this work. Dr. Timothy Carson served as a parish pastor for decades and now teaches in the Honors College of the University of Missouri-Columbia. During his tenure in St. Louis, he served as president of the Interfaith Partnership for 6 years. He is the author and editor of several books, and he now counsels people recovering from many forms of trauma. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carson and Kathy to the Bema to read his poem, A Story Like This.
Peace to all of you. Passing through a story like this means walking on uneven ground, falling forward and sideways, stopping to regain balance, arms outstretched like an acrobat on a tight wire. A story like this means stumbling through the darkened room with remembered landmarks, shadows filling the house, black and white photos resting on the mantelpiece. A story like this means driving west at sunset, light blinding sight, the road disappearing, hands holding tight before the cooling of the earth and the descent of night. A story like this begins as a whisper and grows into the wailing a diary can scarcely tell, echoes behind wall and wire, tracks, ash, and stripes. A story like this is endless. Time stopped, the bridge out, monsters roaming the land, no cavalry on the way, tears the only food until even tears are no more. How a story like this passes from the teller to the told, a baton snatched from the one and carried by the other remains entirely unknown and has no guarantee. In the end, a story like this is received by those who were never there when words lanced silence, taking their place of honor, echoes of the ancestors. Passing through a story like this means a cup of wine, torn bread, sacred words on vellum, an empty chair at the table, the candle still burning, the next prayer, and the next.
Thank you, Dr. Carson. It is now my honor to introduce this year's descendant speaker, David Halpern is the son of survivor Chana Halpern and an active member of our Survivors and Descendants group. He has also played a pivotal role in organizing this year's Yom HaShoah. Thank you for everything, David. We are honored to have you here today to share your family's story.
My name is David Halpern. It is truly an incredible honor and a major mitzvah standing up here in my congregation with my rabbis and my fellow survivors and descendants. Hitler did not win. We did, because we are standing here today. I am also joined by Melissa Klein on this important occasion. Melissa is the great-granddaughter of Herschel and Hinda Kagan, and the granddaughter of Sam and Clara Hipschman, Polish survivors of the Holocaust. Mrs. Hipschman was a dear friend of my mother, and we were always invited to their home for the holidays. Mrs. Hipschman was like a second mother to me. Mr. and Mrs. Hipschman and Diana and Martin were like family. One of the great pleasures of my mother's life was babysitting for Melissa and her sister Jennifer, and also Gay Guller, who walked the procession with me, and her brother Mark. I am greatly honored to have Melissa here with me to commemorate this moment, to honor her grandparents and my mother. I know they are looking down on us. I also know my daughter Lori is watching in Omaha, even though she never got to meet my mother, but she does know the stories. Sometimes being a descendant means embracing the unknown. My mother, Chana Halpern, was an incredible woman who shouldered the horrors of the Holocaust alone, losing almost her entire family. She was born in Poland and spent at least part of the Shoah in a camp before liberation, and before emigrating to the United States with me in tow, without my father, after my birth, in a displacement camp after the war. My mother tried to be both a mother and father to me, and I think she did a heck of a job. She is always in my memory. What I don't know could fill volumes. I don't know what camp or camps my mother was imprisoned in. I do know, like many survivors and descendants, I never had grandparents or cousins or uncles or aunts. They were all murdered in the war. I don't know if she spent the entire Holocaust in Poland or was transported elsewhere. She was in the Warsaw Ghetto, I do know that, but I don't know if she was ever in hiding or if she ever escaped. Like many of my fellow descendants, there is much I don't know. Regrettably, I did not get as much information from her as I might have. But let me tell you what I do know. I know my mother, like all other survivors, suffered greatly from her experience during the Holocaust, and the trauma she experienced impacted her for the rest of her life. I also know she was strong and she was brave. I know she made sure I always had enough, that I was always taken care of. I know she was part of an incredible group of survivors and descendants in St. Louis, many of whom are here today, including Melissa's parents, Buddy and Diana Lerman, and her uncle Martin, who is watching us in California. I know she worked hard and spent much of her free time volunteering, and was Sister Vida Prince's very first volunteer. She was very dedicated to the Holocaust community, and I have tried to follow her legacy. And I know she loved me right to her death in 1988. Like my mother, I feel it is my duty to support the survivor community and my fellow descendants. When Nellie Grosswasser called me 16 or 17 years ago about joining this community survivor and descendant group, I was at a point in my life when the Holocaust was but a distant memory. Now being part of this community is one of the most important things in my life. I thirst for the knowledge that I regrettably did not seek out as a young person. Like my fellow descendants in the group, we all lean on our strengths to support each other, and to support the remaining survivor community. What do? I drive. As a young person, I drove my mother to services, on errands, and to events. Now I have transported over the years a number of fellow survivors from place to place. Through this, I spent hours with survivors Sarah Klein, Betty Novick, Hilda Lebanon, Shifra Breitberg, Liz Mayer, Felicia Wirtz, Ann Zwiebelman, and B. Wiley. A bit of humor. Some years ago, I drove Hilda and Shifra, two lovely ladies in their 90s, to the museum in the pouring rain. It took Andrew Goldfeder and me around 5 minutes to get them out of the car and into the museum, but we got it done. I don't get that wet when I take a shower. Now I'm proud to say I'm Rachel Miller's personal chauffeur. I have learned so much from these incredible women by driving them around. I feel as if I'm making up for lost time with my mother. If the situation were reversed and my mother was still here today, I'd like to think someone else would have slipped behind the wheel and driven my mother from place to place, just as I did as a young man. This is my way of carrying on her legacy. I am who I am because of my mother. I stand here today because of her. I am a husband, a father, and a proud grandfather of 6 beautiful children. And I'd like to think she's looking down on me now, smiling. Mom, I hope I've made you proud. I miss you. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your beautiful remarks. Now, to give a special poetry reading is Holocaust survivor Rachel Miller. Rachel survived the Holocaust in hiding in France until after liberation. After the war, she came to the United States and began to share her testimony. Over the years, Rachel has given her testimony to thousands of students. I, like so many in this room, have had the incredible privilege to observe Rachel's ability to connect with students and share her story with them. She is an incredible speaker and an inspiration to us all. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. To remember and not to forget. I am standing before, let me put on my glasses, that would help. I am standing before thee, the servant of Israel, thanking thee for my life, and rather for so many lives that you were given to me. And I wonder why me and not the others, and perhaps was I spared to remember and not to forget. And I remember Kristallnacht, the sound of broken glass, the sound of drums and marching boots, and I remember the trembling in my heart. How can I forget the burning of synagogues, the parchment of the Torah, and the streets, and the trampled upon? The cutting of beards and paises, the beating, the crushing of skulls, the blood, the outcry, the trucks, the concentration camps, and the ghettos. I remember endless masses of my people being slaughtered. I see mothers clutching their babies to their bosom for the last time, and I feel their wet tears running down my cheeks. I see the hates of my oppressors and their laughter and mockery, and I feel empty and lost. I feel the burning of bullets in my flesh, cold, hungry, and despair, and barbed wire around me. And I remember the word being silent. How can I forget Auschwitz, Majdanek, Bergen-Belsen, Theresienstadt, Buchenwald, Krakow, Warsaw, Grossrasen, Babybel, Ravensburg, and so many others. How can I forget Moshe, Yanko and Rivka, Hans and Christian, Michelle and Robert Henry, and so many names? I hear their cries of pain and so many, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Echad. I am listening to their last breath, their curse, and their praise. How can I forget the sound of shovels and the winds that carries an endless sound of Ishkabal of Shema Rabbah? And I remember the world being silent. How can I forget skeletons, the swollen, dragging feet, their thin, death-looking yellow faces with their thin, long noses, links and links around of Schnell, your Judens. I see shiny boots, black uniforms, and I feel the sting of vents. I remember the endless train rides, the cattle cars, the thirst and the dying of the babies, the young and old, and the angel of death riding along. And I remember the world being silent. I remember a band playing Wagner, and I see the finger pointing to the left and to the right, to be or not to be. I smell the stench of human flesh. I see tall chimneys and the martyr soul escaping in smoke. I hear the cries of agony of tortured beings, knives cutting into their flesh, human guinea pigs. I see mounds of golden teeth, shoes, human hair, and lamps made of skin. And I remember the word being silent. How can I forget the capos, their whips, broken bones, broken spirit, the many nations that help us destroy our people? How can I forget some very few who risked their life to save and comfort us? I remember the kneeling bodies in front of theirs to the grave, the rattling of machine guns, and mountains of human flesh. I remember the hangings in front of theirs to the graves and rattling of machine guns and mountains of human flesh. I remember the hangings, and I feel the choking around the necks and the last gaps of life. How can I forget their dreams, the love of their parents, brothers and sisters? I see their hollow cheeks and their burning eyes of despair, and I see their eyes plucked out of the socket. There were no more tears. It was dark now, and I remember the world being silent. My God, my soul is tormented. It is so much pain to remember, but it is so hard to forget. This poem was written in 1972 by Alexander Turton, a survivor of the Holocaust.
Thank you, Rachel, for that incredible reading and for sharing your testimony with us for so many years. Next, we welcome Michael Kukler. Michael is a member of the Yom HaShoah Committee and a professor at St. Charles Community College. For many years, he has worked tirelessly to educate his students on the history of the Holocaust. Today, he is here to share some remarks on that history.
In his memoir, Survival in Auschwitz, Primo Levi speaks of the need to tell the rest meaning everyone, including people who are not Jewish, like me. Levi was consumed with the desire to testify of his experiences at Auschwitz. The need to tell the rest, he says, to make the rest participate in it, had taken on for us, before our liberation and after, the character of an immediate and violent impulse to the point of competing with our other elementary needs. Primo Levi and so many other survivors were convinced to their core that the wider world must know of the things and people we commemorate at Yom HaShoah. We in Holocaust education have a passion to listen and to transmit, and what we have to teach is challenging and frequently uncomfortable. Our subject defies easy summary. As novelist Eric Viard writes in The Order of the Day, great catastrophes often creep up on us in tiny steps. One of the Warsaw Ghetto scribes wrote that it is a fact that reality has outdone imagination. Our job as Holocaust educators is to retrace those steps and to guide our students in a subject which indeed challenges the imagination. For as one survivor, Charlotte Delbo, wrote of newly arriving prisoners at Auschwitz, they expect the worst, not the unthinkable. The complexity of the Holocaust is such that every academic discipline can be invoked: history, political science, literature, business, health, philosophy, theology, and more. Every academic discipline contributes to this area of study. In my own field of literature, there is a consistent interrogation of language itself. Primo Levi says, just as our hunger is not that feeling of missing a meal, so our way of being cold has need of a new word. We say hunger, we say tiredness, fear, pain. We say winter, and they are different things. They are free words, created and used by free people who lived in comfort and suffering in their homes. We need to listen to voices like this and to avoid the temptation to turn away or to retreat into platitudes. As teachers and students, we find sustenance and a sterling example of resistance in the dedication to education and to cultural activities among Jews during the war. Even in the grim circumstances of the ghettos of Warsaw, Vilna, Kovno, and Łódź, clandestine education enabled students and teachers to maintain continuity with their past and a semblance of normalcy in the present at a time when Jews were under lethal attack. Education is also a signal of hope for the future. What will we do with this knowledge? We need students who are not only educated in the historical facts and in the literature. We need students capable of critical thinking. For instance, to note when the Holocaust is being wrongly appropriated for political purposes or cheapened in social media or popular culture. We want to stimulate lifelong learning. We want our students' factual knowledge to be leavened by a larger understanding, an understanding that is rooted in the eyewitness testimony of those who experienced the Shoah.
We will now turn to the candle-lighting portion of our commemoration. In honor of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, we light 6 memorial candles. We light a 7th candle for the victims of all genocides around the world, and conclude with the placing of a rose for the righteous among the nations. Since our community's earliest Yom HaShoah commemoration, the first candle has always been lit by Sarah Wolf. Though Sarah and her beloved husband Leo have passed away, our Holocaust Museum is the fulfillment of their shared vision. Michael Wolf, will you please light our first candle as you pass your family's legacy of remembrance on to the next generation? The second candle will be lit by Gloria Kaplan-Feldman and her brother David Kaplan. Gloria and David's parents were able to somehow survive and saved the lives of Gloria and David. Their other children were murdered, along with most of their family. Their horrific and traumatic journey took them from their home in HaShoah, Lithuania, to ghettos, to concentration camps, to forests, and to hiding in trenches. It was something they never talked about. They were liberated on May 8th of 1945. After time in hospital and a DP camp, the family was sponsored by cousins in St. Louis and arrived in 1949. They built a happy life in St. Louis and are grateful to the St. Louis community. This candle is to honor the survivors in the memory of their victims. Gloria married Reuben of blessed memory in 1957. They had 2 children and now grandchildren and great-grandchildren. David also has 2 children and grandchildren. The next 2 candles will be lit by George and Rita Heyman. George Heyman was raised in Berlin together with his sister Erna and half-sister Ruth. His father thought being a World War I veteran would protect him, but his dry goods store was destroyed during Kristallnacht, and the family left for Shanghai in 1939. World War II was declared while they were en route to Shanghai, where they landed, but their possessions were all returned to Germany. With the support of the Joint Distribution Committee, the family emigrated to the United States in 1947 and ultimately settled in St. Louis. Rita Silberstein grew up in Berlin, together with 2 brothers and 1 sister. Her father was arrested and spent the war years performing hard labor. Her mother and sister acquired false baptismal papers from an evangelical minister. All of Rita's immediate family survived the Holocaust, although 68 relatives were murdered in Auschwitz. Rita, her family, and her immigrated to the United States in 1951 and settled in St. Louis. Rita met George Hyman almost immediately after arriving. They married in 1957, have 2 sons, 5 grandchildren. The next candle will be lit by Eva Aschner and joined by Rabbi Rosenberg. Eva Suskind Aschner was born in 1937 in Glatz, Germany. At the age of 4, Eva witnessed the horrors of Kristallnacht. Hoping to escape the escalating danger of life in Germany, Eva's parents decided to emigrate to the Philippines. Arriving in Manila in 1939, life became more difficult after the invasion of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Eva's father was killed in Manila, but she and her mother survived and emigrated to the United States in 1949. Eva's husband, Fred, of blessed memory, was born in 1930 in Meissen, Germany. Fred's parents fled to the safety of the Netherlands in 1938, not anticipating the Germans would occupy the Netherlands in 1940. In 1943, they were taken by truck to Westerbork and then deported to Bergen-Belsen. Only Fred survived. He immigrated to the United States to live with an aunt and uncle in 1949, where he then met Eva. The next candle will be lit by Michael Rubin. Michael was born on January 2nd of 1931 to Rose and Isaac Rubin Shaitan. Their families had lived in Kyiv, Ukraine for many generations. His life changed drastically in 1941. He was 10 years old when his family was evacuated amid the German bombings. He spent the next 5 years of his life barely surviving. His experience included walking on foot over the mountains with no food or water. He was injured with shrapnel in his hand and leg from the bombing. He crossed the Caspian Sea, traveled in train cars with dead bodies, worked day and night in the northern Ural Mountains, where the temperature was negative 40 degrees Celsius. Michael was working at a military factory when he was liberated on May 9th of 1945. He went back at 15 years old to rebuild Kyiv and get an education. He graduated from the Kyiv Conservatory, received a degree from the Financial Institute, and taught music. Michael, his wife and son Alex, immigrated to America in 1978. Michael is the last of the 180 veterans of the war from our Russian-Ukrainian community. Michael would like to thank everyone in the St. Louis Jewish community for helping him. With him today are his grandsons, Nick and Andrew. The next candle, in honor of victims of all genocides, will be lit by Elvadim Pasic, representing the Bosnian community. As a survivor of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Elvadim Pasic was one of the first witnesses to testify in 2012 at the war crimes trial of the military commando Ratko Mladic by the International Criminal Tribunal of the former Yugoslavia. His testimony was used to show that Mladic's forces committed genocide through forcible deportation, numerous other crimes against humanity, and mass murder. Mladic was the Serbian general who initiated the siege of Sarajevo and later led the forces that massacred 8,000 Bosnian men and boys after overrunning the UN safe area in Srebrenica. He was indicted for war crimes in 1996 and was at large until 2011. Pasic told the court about a less infamous incident, a mass murder in the village of Grabogic, where 162 men were brutally murdered, and the last time he saw his father, uncle, cousins, and friends, who were from a nearby village in Kotor Varos. Their bodies were never recovered. Pasic came to the United States after the war with his sister in 1996. As a US citizen, he lives with his wife, Adina, and their 2 young children on a quiet street in South St. Louis County. Pasic works as an inventory control supervisor at Marlowe Coil DRS. Thank you to each and every one of our candlelighters and their families for being with us today. We are honored to bear witness to your powerful stories. Sometimes the act of sharing testimony or educating others about the Holocaust, as Michael did a few minutes ago, are powerful forms of resistance. To further discuss the critical need for and the importance of Holocaust education, I now turn to the chair of the Missouri Holocaust Education and Awareness Commission, Dee Dee Simon.
Thank you. On this Yom HaShoah, we gather to commemorate the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust. We remember the pain, the suffering, and loss of the victims, their families, and future generations, so that we do not forget the truths of this cataclysmic event. With mounting evidence that knowledge of the Holocaust is fading, there is a nationwide push for Holocaust education to be taught in all schools. Currently, there are 23 states that have legislation regarding Holocaust education. In June 2022, Missouri became one of those states with the passage of the Missouri Holocaust Education and Awareness Commission Act, a bill with bipartisan support mandating Holocaust education in all Missouri schools. This bill aims to educate students about the Holocaust and inspire a sense of responsibility to recognize and uphold human value and to prevent future atrocities. Sadly, anti-Semitism did not end with the Holocaust. Anti-Semitic incidents rose to historic levels in the United States since last year. It is only with an educated citizenry that we can, as a community, a state, and a nation, stand up against anti-Semitism and hatred. Education, a form of resistance, is our best defense. Whenever it was possible, parents imprisoned by the Nazis continued their children's educations. Because this was forbidden by the Nazis, students demonstrated their resistance and resilience by hiding their books underneath their clothes when needed so that they would not be caught. Adults in the ghettos continued to educate themselves, holding lectures on literature and culture and Therese's thought, and establishing a secret medical school in the Warsaw Ghetto. But they also ensured, despite the worst of circumstances, that their children were being given an educational foundation. And why did they do this? Because they knew, as we know, that education is hope. Learning, especially learning important and truthful lessons about history, is the best thing that we can do to avoid past mistakes and prepare ourselves for a better future. As our state embarks upon this challenging yet vitally important mission to teach Holocaust education in Missouri schools, may we keep all individuals in our thoughts, especially our educators, the true guardians of a community. May they be granted the knowledge, discernment, and wisdom required to teach this history to their students, our world's future leaders. It is now my pleasure to introduce one such guardian, a social studies teacher from Washington High School in Washington, Missouri, Carrie Flynn. Carrie has been a dedicated educator for over 25 years, during which time she has taught psychology, sociology, human rights and genocide, and modern U.S. history. Carrie is a teacher fellow at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. She is education director for the Genocide Education Project and serves as executive secretary for the Missouri Council of the Social Studies. Carrie will now place a white rose in honor of the righteous. She is joined by student Abby Meyer.
My name is Matt Berman, and I'm a third-generation descendant. Last year, my family and I had the honor of lighting the flame of remembrance, dedicated to all descendants. This year, the flame will be lit by David Halpern, whose powerful testimony you just heard. David will be joined by Melissa Klein.
Thank you, Matt and David. We will now be reciting the Kaddish. Please help me welcome Harvey and Michael Wolf.
Please join us for the mourner's Kaddish.
Please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei rabbah Yama divrach hirutei v'yamlech v'yamechon v'chayei d'kol bet Yisrael v'agalav v'zman karim v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah v'rach le'olam u'lamaya Yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yisbar v'yisroman v'yitnaseh v'yishadar v'yishalel v'yishalal shemei kudusha b'rechu La'el min kol baracha v'sharata tushbekata v'nechemata daran Alma Divru, Amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayein Aleinu, V'kol Yisrael V'yimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru, Amen.
Thank you, Harvey and Michael. For the musical portion of our program, we will hear from musicians Misha and Tora Breitberg of Aria Musicians. We are grateful they have joined us this year to perform the theme from Schindler's List. They will then lead us in the Song of the Partisans. Following the Breitbergs' performance, we will continue with the Hatikva, sung by Holocaust descendant Laura Lebanon and the Shinshanim and the Israeli Scouts. Please feel free to join them in adding your voice to the chorus of our community. Could our vocalists please come and join us upon the steps? To my Shinshanim, if you could please come down, and my Israeli Scouts, if you could please come down this aisle and file behind the candles. Lord, beleva penima nefesh Yehudi omia ufatem mizrach kadima Ayin Zion Sophia Od lo avda tikvatenu hatikva bashnot alpayim liodam choshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liod Hamchoshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Thank you. And now the partisan song. Please remain standing if you are able. Thank you to each and every person here and watching online for joining us for this year's commemoration. You have truly honored our mission to honor the survivors and to remember the victims of the Shoah. For this, we are ever grateful. To honor our survivors and their families, there'll be a small reception across the hall after the conclusion of this program. Thank you to the Missouri Holocaust Education and Awareness Commission for supporting and putting this reception together. To honor our nation and our community's liberators and veterans, the Breitbergs will play our national anthem. Following the anthem, we will close our program with the blowing of the shofar by Robert Feldman and the recession of the Torahs. If you are able, please remain standing. Again, thank you all so much for coming. There's a reception across the hall. Be well and be safe.